The veiled depths of Vatican mysteries. For centuries, the Vatican has occupied a singular position in the global imagination, a place where religious authority merges with intricate secrecy. It is far more than the seat of the Catholic Church. It is a sovereign microstate steeped in rituals, political dealings, clandestine archives, and innumerable stories that defy explanation. What if behind these time-worn walls lie concealed truths that, once revealed, could forever change our views of religion, history, and even reality itself? These questions compel us to sift through legends, documents, and rumors surrounding this tiny city-state. From forbidden texts said to summon demons to alleged evidence of ancient extraterrestrial encounters, the tales seem endless. Yet the Church, governed by a unique administrative structure called the Roman Curia, has historically shielded itself behind doctrines of faith and tightly guarded policies. As we delve into these stories, we begin to understand why so many find the Vatican an irresistible enigma. One of the more disturbing whispers concerns a book known as the Grand Grimoire, or Le Dragon Rouge, rumored to be so dangerous that many claim the Vatican locked away its original copy for centuries to prevent its dark spells from falling into the wrong hands. Simultaneously, rumors of the Vatican's involvement in ufological phenomena have surged. The startling allegations of David Grush, a former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer, suggest that the Church may have once concealed wreckage from an unidentified flying object that crashed in Italy prior to World War II. While no official corroboration exists, stories swirl of Pope Pius XIII quietly informing American authorities about a downed craft hidden within Mussolini's Italy. Then there is the fabled chronovisor, a device purportedly invented by a secret Vatican research team in the mid-20th century. An invention said to let users witness past events, including biblical scenes like the crucifixion of Christ. Supposedly spearheaded by an Italian priest named Father Pellegrino Ernetti, this time machine and any photographs it produced never found their way into verified scientific testing or peer-reviewed publications. If real, it would be a tool with staggering implications, raising the specter of forging historical evidence or delving into timelines best left untouched. Even more tangible marvels exist in the literal foundations of the Holy See. Below St. Peter's Basilica stretches a vast necropolis, a city of the dead, from the 1st century A.D. Deep in these layers, archaeologists found an amalgamation of pagan and early Christian tombs, culminating in what the Vatican identifies as the resting place of St. Peter, the rock upon which the Catholic Church was built. Despite centuries of tradition, debate continues over whether these remnants truly belong to the apostle. Yet the necropolis, rich with architectural vestiges and cryptic inscriptions, reveals how Christianity and paganism once blended, shaping an evolving spiritual identity beneath the basilica's soaring domes. Such accounts illuminate a church grappling with both the depths of the invisible world and the practicalities of safeguarding knowledge. These stories, gleaned from rumor scholarship and glimpses of official statements, show that the line separating faith and secrecy can become remarkably thin behind the Vatican's imposing walls. Not all Vatican enigmas revolve around supernatural powers or hidden technologies. Some revolve around historical events carrying profound moral and political weight. One particularly poignant case is the mysterious death of Pope John Paul I in September 1978. Ascending to the papacy with a humble spirit, John Paul might quickly won the affection of the faithful, Then, a mere 33 days after he was elected, the papacy was jolted by his abrupt death. Initial explanations pointed to a heart attack. Others insisted the Pope had been in excellent health, fueling speculation of foul play. Conspiracy theories widely circulated that he had begun probing financial corruption linked to the Vatican Bank, historically overseen by controversial figures like Bishop Paul Marcinkus, and that such inquiries might have put him in peril. Despite repeated assurances by church officials, the Vatican never permitted an official autopsy, leaving behind a swirl of theories that remain unresolved. In parallel, the massive Egyptian obelisk, standing at the center of St. Peter's Square, reminds us of Catholicism's complex dialogue with older religions. This ancient monument, believed to have originated in Heliopolis, was brought to Rome by Emperor Caligula and eventually placed in its current spot in 1586 under Pope Sixtus V. Erecting this 300-ton granite spire was an unprecedented feat of engineering in its day, demanding hundreds of workers and an elaborate system of pulleys. It once served as a silent witness to the persecution of early Christians, including, according to many accounts, the martyrdom of St. Peter. Over time, it has changed from a trophy of a pagan empire into a towering symbol reinterpreted under Christian faith. Yet controversies involving relics add another dimension to Vatican lore. In 2013, Pope Francis unveiled small bone fragments believed to be those of St. Peter, himself discovered decades earlier, in a niche beneath the basilica floor. While revered by many believers, scientific verification remains elusive. The Church, preserving the sacredness of these relics, has been reluctant to permit extensive testing. Meanwhile, relics from the so-called true cross, the cross on which Jesus was crucified, have been scattered across the globe for centuries, and the sheer number of claimed fragments has long invited skepticism. Even so, the Catholic faithful regularly venerate these relics during liturgical celebrations, demonstrating that physical remnants, however contested, hold tremendous spiritual resonance. Behind the grand facades of St. Peter's Basilica and the Vatican walls lies an administrative structure as pivotal as any royal court, the Roman Curia. This is the central governing body that assists the Pope, comprising powerful congregations like the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which historically functioned as the office of the Inquisition. Today, it evaluates doctrinal matters and helps safeguard church teachings worldwide. Such an organization, however, is not without controversies. Over the years, allegations of hidden networks, corruption, and financial malpractice have punctuated the curious history, feeding the notion that the Vatican must carefully manage public perception to prevent damaging exposures. Amid all this, the Holy See maintains diplomatic relations with over 180 states, orchestrates a sophisticated financial system, and invests across global markets while proclaiming its own ethical standards on investments. Whether dealing with black magic manuscripts, suspicious papal deaths, towering obelisks from antiquity, or relics claiming the bones of saints, the Vatican is a complex tapestry of devotion, politics, secrecy, and tradition. One of the most surprising accounts entwines with the topic of Vatican prisoners in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. After the unification of Italy stripped the Papal States from church control, Pope Pius IX declared himself a prisoner in the Vatican. For nearly 6 decades, successive popes refused to leave the confined territory of Vatican City, declining to recognize Italy's authority. Only with the Lateran Treaty of 1929 signed between Pope Pius and Benito Mussolini did that stalemate end, resulting in the Vatican's international status as a sovereign city-state. This event underscores the political dimension of the Holy See's existence, revealing a curious truth that behind centuries of liturgical grandeur stood a church locked in subtle or overt conflicts with secular powers. Other secrets revolve around relics and religious artifacts steeped in theological debate. Chief among them is the Shroud of Turin, widely considered by many Christians to be the burial cloth of Jesus. Carbon dating tests in 1988 seemingly indicated the linen originated in the Middle Ages, but subsequent critiques questioned the reliability of those samples, reigniting controversy. Even more arresting was the work of Vatican researcher Barbara Frail, who detected faint Greek, Latin, and Hebrew inscriptions on the cloth, suggesting a form of death certificate. Though these findings haven't been universally accepted, they exemplify how deeply religious tradition and scientific inquiry can collide. The Vatican, for its part, keeps the shroud's official status as an object of reverence rather than a scientifically certified relic. Beyond relics, the Vatican's labyrinthine structure contains physical pathways as cryptic as its historical ones. A prime example is the Passetto di Borgo, often nicknamed the Pope's Escape Tunnel. This elevated passage, spanning roughly 800 meters, connects Vatican City to the fortress of Castel Sant'Angelo. In 1527, during the brutal sack of Rome, Pope Clement VII is said to have raced through this corridor to evade rampaging troops. Today, it stands both as a historical monument and a metaphor for how the papacy has survived centuries of tumult by staying one step ahead, sometimes literally of mortal dangers. Secrecy also pervades the Vatican Apostolic Archive, once called the Vatican's Secret Archive. Although some parts of it are accessible to qualified researchers, critics argue that significant swaths remain off-limits, protecting documents that might challenge mainstream narratives of historical events. The archive purportedly contains records from the Inquisition's secret diplomatic correspondence, transcripts from the trial of the Knights Templar, and perhaps even references to unexplained phenomena. While no verifiable evidence has surfaced to confirm rumors of UFO files, the enduring hush around these materials sparks continual speculation about what revelations might be hidden. Adding to the lore, the Vatican is often cited as having the highest crime rate per capita in the world. This statistic is mostly a technicality with fewer than 1,000 residents, but millions of tourists, even petty theft in St. Peter's Square causes the numerical figures to skyrocket. Nonetheless, the surreal notion that the epicenter of Catholicism has such a statistic reaffirms its dual identity, a revered holy site and an international tourist destination. Each facet, from political negotiations to relic veneration, from clandestine archives to improbable crime stats, underscores the Vatican's layered identity, a tiny realm brimming with complexities that stretch far beyond liturgy and pious devotion. When power, scandal, and secrecy intertwine, as the Renaissance period dawned, the Vatican found itself swept up in a maelstrom of political maneuverings and personal ambitions epitomized by one of the most controversial families in church history, the Borgias. Arriving from Spain, the Borgia clan rose to extraordinary heights of ecclesiastical power with astounding speed. Among them was Pope Alexander II, originally Rodrigo Borgia, whose papacy, 1492-1503, became synonymous with nepotism, graft, and moral decay. while he significantly advanced the Church's strategic interests, welcoming diplomats, brokering alliances, and influencing the overseas conquests of emerging European empires, his personal life rattled the foundations of Catholic morality. The lavish feasts held in the papal palace, including the infamous Banquet of the Chestnuts, underscored a culture of debauchery. Eyewitnesses described courtesans, scandalous games, and the widespread distribution of wealth and titles, as though they were party favors. In that era, the papacy often meant balancing spiritual leadership with earthly dominion. But Alexander VI's reign laid bare the extreme corruption that could emerge when the pursuit of power trumped the precepts of faith. Such entanglements between secular might and religious prestige reverberate beyond the Renaissance. Multiple investigations have implicated the Vatican in modern financial controversies, most notably involving the Vatican Bank, officially the Institute for the Works of Religion. During the 1970s and 1980s, Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, an American who directed the bank, came under scrutiny for suspected money laundering and secretive alliances with notorious figures in international finance. Some allegations tied the bank to the Italian mafia and large-scale embezzlement culminating in the collapse of Banco Ambrosiano, which triggered a financial earthquake in Italy. Despite these accusations, Marcinkus was shielded from prosecution by diplomatic immunity and lived out his days with minimal repercussions, an emblem of how the Vatican's sovereign status and labyrinthine legal system can shroud its internal affairs from external oversight. Such clouds of suspicion cast a long shadow, intersecting at times with tragedies that remain unresolved. Pope John Paul I's abrupt death in 1978, although officially attributed to a heart attack, sparked numerous theories that he had begun probing wrongdoing in the Vatican's financial networks. Whether or not these suspicions are substantiated, they speak to a recurring theme. The Church, vested with moral authority, also embodies the vulnerabilities of a massive institution, managing extensive wealth, priceless assets, and thousands of personnel stationed across the globe. The relentless need for damage control has spawned an institutional culture wary of public scrutiny and, in some instances, reticent to reveal the entire truth. Equally controversial have been suggestions of Vatican collusion with political regimes, including allegations about Nazi gold transferred into Vatican accounts, or the Church's delayed acknowledgement of genocidal atrocities, such as the Rwandan genocide in 1994. According to various human rights organizations, certain Catholic priests were implicated in mass killings, and more than one suspect was covertly relocated instead of being handed over to face local or international justice. While the Holy See has sometimes quietly aided post-conflict reconciliation efforts, critics insist that genuine contrition requires fuller transparency about clerical complicity. Against this backdrop, the line between faith and institutional survival can become blurred. The Borgia era may be centuries past, but the tension between genuine spiritual mission and the realities of accumulated power persists, revealing a Vatican continually engaged in precarious balancing acts. In more recent times, the inner workings of the Vatican have been further scrutinized through a different lens: sexual identity and secrecy within the clergy. French journalist Frédéric Martel ignited a firestorm with his 2019 book, In the Closet of the Vatican, in which he claimed that approximately 80% of the Vatican clergy identify as homosexual, though most remain closeted. Martel and other observers contend that a deep-seated culture of duplicity has flourished. Certain officials condemn homosexuality publicly, yet lead double lives in private. This is no small issue. The Catholic Church's official stance on homosexuality has historically been stringent, resulting in what experts describe as a climate of denial and internal conflict. Such secrecy may in turn foster systemic vulnerabilities. Critics argue that when large numbers of clergy members cannot live in alignment with their genuine selves, it normalizes a culture of concealment where more serious lapses, financial misconduct, abuse, or cover-ups might also escape scrutiny. A particularly illuminating scandal erupted in 2010 when a male prostitution network catering to high-ranking church officials was uncovered in Italy. Wiretapped evidence pointed to potential blackmail schemes linking clergy members to organized crime and powerful lobbies. While the scandal made headlines, the Vatican never offered a comprehensive account of how deeply the ring had penetrated its institutions. Persistent calls for a clearer stance, or at least more transparent pastoral guidance, continue to meet official reticence. Meanwhile, the Church's record on issues like child abuse exacerbates these concerns. Internal documents, sometimes referred to as Canon 489 files, suggest that for centuries the Vatican meticulously recorded grave offenses within clergy ranks, yet kept them sealed away. Only in the early 2000s did some of these records start surfacing due to court orders, especially after shocking cases in Boston and Ireland shook public trust worldwide. Pope Francis initiated more forceful rhetoric and policies to address abuse, but many survivors groups remain skeptical, pointing to ongoing patterns of incomplete disclosure and the shuffling of accused priests to new locations without public accountability. Concurrently, the Vatican grapples with other controversies that blur religious theology and historical authenticity. The phantom time hypothesis, though widely rejected by mainstream historians, posits that roughly 3 centuries of the early Middle Ages, AD 614-911, were fabricated possibly with papal collusion to locate Europe symbolically near the year 1000. While regarded as fringe theory, it underscores how central the Vatican's historical record-keeping has been to Western chronology. Similarly, the saga of missing books of the Bible stirs debate among scholars who point out that many early Christian texts, known as Apocrypha, were included in older Bibles only to be excluded later. Critics question whether certain doctrines or passages were deliberately removed or suppressed for doctrinal uniformity. Church authorities typically maintain that these works, while historically interesting, failed to meet the theological criteria set by early ecumenical councils. Close to these textual mysteries are speculations about the Vatican's alleged knowledge of extraterrestrial life. Some conspiracy theories argue that secret archives hold ancient references to otherworldly beings who purportedly aided or influenced early civilizations such as the Sumerians. Although lacking direct proof, these ideas feed a broader narrative that the Church entrusted with shaping human spiritual understanding might be determined to keep disruptive knowledge hidden. Taken together, these stories illustrate the magnitude of the Vatican's institutional complexity, a fortress of faith and governance that can be rocked at its foundations by revelations tied to personal identity, doctrinal origins, and the boundaries of history itself. Throughout these labyrinthine allegations and revelations, perhaps the most haunting question remains: at what cost does an institution sustain secrecy in the name of protecting the faithful, preserving unity, or defending tradition? The tension between spiritual principles and institutional actions is palpable. On one side, the Vatican sees itself as the steadfast protector of a 2,000-year-old faith tradition tasked with guiding the moral compass of over 1 billion Catholics worldwide. On the other hand, historical episodes from the Borgia Pope's blatant corruption to sexual abuse cover-ups reveal that the Church's aspiration toward holiness can be at odds with the very human flaws and appetites of its internal hierarchy. Moreover, efforts to maintain unwavering authority have often dovetailed with complex political calculations. During World War II, for instance, Pope Pius XII faced fierce criticism for not speaking more forcefully against Hitler's atrocities. Later, revelations of clandestine assistance rendered by priests to persecuted Jews illustrated that some church efforts were real, but kept quiet. Yet this silence also proved damaging, fueling accusations that the Vatican was more invested in diplomatic caution than in an unequivocal moral stance. Similarly, the Church's entanglements in the American Civil War, evident in Pope Pius IX's acknowledgement of Confederate President Jefferson Davis, left a lingering rift between the Holy See and the U.S. government for over a century. These historical precedents show that religious convictions frequently intersect with pragmatic alliances, sometimes leaving moral clarity in the dust. In the modern day, the Vatican's stance on topics such as the environment, economic justice, or human rights indicates a willingness to speak up in global matters. Yet unresolved contentions remain, particularly about how the Church addresses human sexuality, deals with clergy misconduct, and disseminates or withholds historical documents. The claim that the Holy See sits upon vast hoards of gold, rumored to be stashed in various banks around the world or within subterranean vaults beneath St. Peter's Basilica, hints at the enduring mystique of an institution that discloses little about its true material wealth. Whether fairly or unfairly, these secret treasures, be they financial, archaeological, or textual, have become emblematic of an age-old power that rarely shows its full hand. Against this background, one might recall stories of archaeological wonders said to lie in the Vatican's keeping, from the Ark of the Covenant, according to one theory, hidden and guarded in the papal vaults, to the curious case of fake Egyptian mummies discovered in the Vatican museums. Every anecdote emphasizes how church archives and collections have grown through centuries of donations, spoils, or redistributions. While the official Catholic narrative frames this curation as the safeguarding of shared human heritage, the conversation about restitution ownership and rightful display remains deeply fraught, especially with nations clamoring for the return of cultural artifacts. In weaving these narratives together, it becomes evident that the Vatican cannot be reduced to any single dimension. It is at once a religious sanctuary, a political state, a financial player, an archaeological curator, and a keeper of immeasurable relics and documents. Ancient mysteries of the Church collide with modern controversies, forging an institution that both captivates and unsettles believers and skeptics alike. The compelling question posed in hushed conspiratorial corners and in open academic debate remains: how much is myth? How much is fear-driven rumor, and how much might be concealed truths shaping the Catholic Church's relationship with the wider world? Perhaps as the centuries continue, their silent march more answers will emerge from behind those imposing walls, ever-evolving legacies and lingering secrets. In the Vatican's ongoing saga, it is often the quiet corners and lesser-known relics that reveal some of the most evocative spiritual and cultural juxtapositions. One striking example stands in the Cortile della Pina, or Court of the Pine Cone, named for the immense bronze pine cone statue that rests there. While to a casual observer it may seem like an ornate decoration from antiquity, the pine cone in many ancient cultures symbolizes spiritual enlightenment, or what some traditions call the third eye. Interestingly, this large bronze sculpture originally came from a Roman fountain near a temple dedicated to the Egyptian goddess Isis, underscoring how the Vatican has in many ways served as both a guardian and an inheritor of symbols that precede Christian practice by centuries. Alongside this pine cone in the courtyard stand two peacock statues, birds that in Christian lore came to represent resurrection and immortality, yet also appear in various pagan mythologies as symbols of cosmic vision or guardians of the afterlife. These juxtapositions capture how over millennia the Church has taken in, repurposed, and resignified ancient imagery, weaving a tapestry of faith that both reveres and transforms the past. A similar process of fusion or cultural reassignment is visible in some of the Vatican's other artworks. The Egyptian Museum, established under Pope Gregory VI, contains a curious statue of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming and the afterlife, who is robed in a Roman cloak while holding the caduceus of Hermes. Such syncretic pieces remind us that Rome, once an empire of overwhelming reach, integrated Egyptian Greek and other religious traditions into daily art and practice. When Christianity emerged as the empire's official religion, much of that rich symbolism did not simply vanish. It was at times quietly unfolded into Christian iconography or preserved as part of the Church's burgeoning collections. Even the mitre, the split-topped ceremonial hat worn by popes and bishops, has been compared to the ancient fish garbs of Babylonian priests worshipping the god Dagon. While the Church views these vestments as entirely Christian in meaning, some scholars see remnants of older worship folded into modern rites, illustrating how historical continuity and religious adaptation can coexist. Other relics or devotions kept by the Vatican traverse the boundary between pious veneration and puzzling heritage. The tradition of incorrupt bodies where a saint or devout person's corpse remains inexplicably preserved for years is a prime example. Many see this as miraculous evidence of holy favor. Yet some, including certain mortuary experts, note the parallel with ancient Egyptian mummification techniques and point to occasional behind-the-scenes embalming. The phenomenon of incorrupt nuns like the American sister Wilhelmina Lancaster, whose body was exhumed in 2023, allegedly found remarkably intact sparks, age-old debates about when science ends and divine intervention begins. Likewise, the Vatican remains the caretaker of relics, such as the preserved heart of St. Camillus de Lellis, a champion of hospital care in the late 16th century, and the alleged brain fragment of St. John Bosco, surreptitiously stolen and then recovered in Italy. Though these items rarely carry monetary value, their spiritual currency is immeasurable, bridging centuries of devotion and lived faith with the physical traces left behind. From treasured fragments of the so-called True Cross to rumored golden artifacts from the Jerusalem Temple, one constant thread unites these curiosities: the question of authenticity often overshadowed by the intensity of believers' reverence. As pilgrims kneel before relics to feel closer to their spiritual heroes, historians and scientists puzzle over how certain pieces, if genuine, escape the ravages of time. Thus, the Vatican's role as keeper of these items is anything but passive. By preserving objects that defy conventional explanation, the Church maintains an enduring link between physical reality and metaphysical belief. Beyond relics and statuary, the Vatican's influence also reaches into domains as varied as architecture, holidays, and the subtle infiltration of once pagan rites into Christian contexts. Consider New Year's Day. Celebrated on January 1st, its name derived from the two-faced Roman god Janus, who looks both backward and forward to mark transitions. The Church recontextualized this date as a time of prayer for world peace and a moment to reflect on the year ahead. But embedded in that festivity is an echo of an older spiritual worldview, one that venerated Janus as guardian of beginnings. Likewise, the Easter celebration central to Christian faith overlaps in symbolic content with festivals once dedicated to deities of spring and renewal. Rabbits and colored eggs serve as vestiges of fertility rituals, performed in honor of goddesses like Eostre. Many Christian families indulge in these customs, unaware of their roots in pre-Christian Europe, an illustration of how the Church, rather than eradicating older customs, found ways to merge them into the cycle of Christian holy days. That same dynamic unfolds in the physical realm of St. Peter's Square, where an 8-spoked solar wheel is carved into the pavement near the Egyptian obelisk. Some interpret this motif as an emblem for the ancient sun god, or even for the Canaanite deity Baal, while official church commentary downplays any pagan link. Yet these stone lines and symbols remain conspicuous, prompting contemplation about how deeply older rites are layered beneath Catholic tradition. A related curiosity appears in the shape of the papal ferula, the staff used by the Pope, and the iconic cross itself, items that certain historians have likened to archaic fertility or solar emblems. The truth in these cases often lies somewhere in the merging of religious evolution, cultural assimilation, and the desire to offer newly converted populations familiar visuals as they embraced Christian worship. Even the biblical canon has undergone transformations affected by shifting ecclesiastical need. The missing books of the Bible, 14 texts collectively known as the Apocrypha, were included in earlier editions such as the original King James Bible, but were gradually removed by 1684. Each excised text, e.g. Tobit, Judith 1 and 2 Maccabees, contains narratives that once had standing in Judeo-Christian circles. Scholars still debate whether these omissions served doctrinal clarity or were aimed at suppressing unofficial stories that could challenge church teachings. The swirling possibility that these texts, much like Gnostic Gospels discovered at Nag Hammadi, offer alternate perspectives on Jesus or the early church remains a thorny subject. So too do radical ideas like the first Apocalypse of James, which depicts a cosmos created not by a benevolent God, but by a malevolent force, a teaching the Church once deemed heretical and too disruptive to official dogma. Still more provocative is the Book of Watchers, describing rebellious angels, the Watchers who came to earth, taught forbidden knowledge, and fathered a race of giants called Nephilim. Banned by church councils centuries ago, it suggests a cosmic drama that tangles divine, demonic, and human realms far more intricately than standard biblical texts. Though mostly forgotten in mainstream circles, references to these stories periodically resurface, fueling speculations that the Church's concern might not be mere legend, but a need to protect a simpler, more uniform theological narrative. Each rediscovery, be it an apocryphal manuscript or an esoteric symbol, reminds us that while official Catholic tradition seeks coherence, the deeper layers of Christian history are anything but monolithic, shaped by centuries of debate, cross-cultural borrowing, and at times enforced orthodoxy. Even as the Church tries to harmonize these varied legacies, the enduring power of imagery and rumor ensures that certain Vatican secrets retain their allure. A poignant illustration is the story of Alexander the Great's missing tomb, which some argue was covertly transferred to Europe and installed in St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, mistakenly honored as the relics of the evangelist Mark. The Vatican has never endorsed this theory, and no advanced examinations have been performed on the body that rests there. Yet the mere possibility that one of history's most renowned conquerors might lie hidden in a Christian shrine speaks to the deep narrative hunger that finds a home in Vatican lore. Similar claims swirl around the possibility of undisclosed expansions beneath St. Peter's, where gold from ancient Jerusalem or lost Christian, Jewish, and even Egyptian relics might remain beyond the public eye. Although the Church characteristically denies these rumors, maintaining that its subterranean archives primarily house documents and historically verified artifacts, the secrecy and the tapestry of unverified claims only magnify public fascination. Those archives, once labeled the Vatican's Secret Archive, and now officially known as the Vatican Apostolic Archive, are themselves a crucible of mystery. Hints of suppressed knowledge, whether about extraterrestrial life, uncovered through the Catholic Church's centuries-long engagement with astronomy, or about hidden correspondences with political figures, are enough to spark perpetual speculation. This hush around the archives, which span miles of shelving, has turned them into a near mythic labyrinth in popular imagination. While some historians do gain limited access, the screening process is stringent, and requests to review certain categories of documents are frequently denied. Critics point out that as long as vaults remain sealed, speculation thrives. Whether about the Ark of the Covenant, the lost treasures of King Solomon, or evidence of the real year being closer to 1725 than 2025, as phantom time, theorists suggest the Church, by withholding certain materials, inadvertently ensures these theories will never fully disappear. Meanwhile, everyday life within the Vatican continues replete with colorful traditions, like the ceremonial uniforms of the Swiss Guard, whose history includes the heroic 1527 stand to save Pope Clement VII. That legacy of loyalty belies occasional tragedies such as the unsolved 1998 shooting of the Swiss Guard, Commander Alois Esteman and his wife, alongside the alleged culprit, Cedric Tournay. The official explanation of a sudden emotional outburst hardly convinced everyone, especially given how swiftly the investigation concluded. Whether one interprets these events as anomalies or as glimpses of hidden political or financial machinations, they reveal the fragile human dimension that can arise even in institutions regarded as nearly sacrosanct. Finally, in a realm bridging devotion and spectacle, the Vatican also serves as a stage for unusual events like the 16th century arrival of an Asian elephant named Hano, gifted by Portugal to Pope Leo X. The Pope's rapturous response, lavish feeding, and the elephant's untimely death allegedly hastened by ingesting gold, offer a historical footnote that underscores how the Holy See has, through centuries, worn many hats: spiritual center, diplomatic hub, cultural confluence, and collector of curiosities. The remains of that elephant, accidentally rediscovered in the Vatican gardens hundreds of years later, highlight a persistent theme. The line between rumor and evidence is always in flux, especially behind the mighty fortress of papal authority. In the end, each strand of Vatican mythology, be it hidden archives, relic controversies, coded art, political alliances, or remnants from ancient civilizations, threads through a living institution that has survived the collapse of empires, navigated modern upheavals, and still commands reverence among countless believers. It remains a paradoxical domain, self-proclaimed guardian of eternal truths, yet wrapped in layers of secrecy and tradition that selectively illuminate or obscure its storied past. That very duality is why the Vatican endures as one of the world's greatest enigmas, sustaining curiosity and reverence, disbelief and awe, year after year, century after century.